Hi, this is Victoria Meyer. Welcome back to the Chemical Show, where chemicals means business. I am recording this live at the HCPA annual meeting in beautiful Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So today I have with me Molly Blessing, who is HCPA's VP of Sustainability and Product Stewardship. Molly, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just talk a little bit about maybe your origin story, how you got interested in sustainability and product stewardship, and what brought you to HCPA.
Sure. I mean, I'm a chemist by background. I should start off by saying that. But I was very fortunate when I went to college at UConn, and UConn is one of the few schools at the time that had a professor in the chemistry department doing what we call green chemistry, or more sustainable chemistry, focused on innovations that will help transition the chemical industry to substitutes that help put better products on the market and also get us to a better environmental situation.
That's cool.
So that's how I really got into this idea that I can take my chemistry and I can use it in a way that helps us be more sustainable. It's not just about making fun new R&D innovations in the lab. It's about making fun new R&D innovations that take us to a more socially and environmentally sustainable economy overall.
Yeah.
So that's where I got my first start in it. And then I started interning at EPA with their green chemistry program while I was still in college. And I was like, wow, there's a policy component to this. It's not just about what's done in the lab. We have to get this onto the market somehow. And there's an agency that reviews it, and it is EPA. And if we don't work with them, and if we don't understand what they're looking for when they're reviewing these new chemicals and when they're thinking about what they're going to allow on the market, we might be making something in lab that we think is fantastic, but that's never going to actually make it into a product. So how do I bridge that gap between chemistry and policy? I started off working with a law firm in DC, Berkeson and Campbell, switched from there to Henkel. They're a big consumer and also adhesives on the business side.
Right.
And then from Henkel, I thought, well, Henkel's fantastic, but I would love to have a bigger impact. And there's only so much impact you can have at any one company. And somebody suggested to me, why don't you look at HCPA? And they sent me this option for a sustainability role. And I was like, well, sustainability is what I want to do. HCPA is a very technical trade association, so it has that chemistry component.
Yeah.
But it also is, of course, very policy driven. That's a lot of what we're trying to do here, is making sure that our members' needs get translated into policy.
Right.
So I thought it was a great fit, and I've been here for about 3 years now, and it's been fantastic.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And I think even that aspect of being in green chemistry from your time in college is unique, because it's still new. It's still new and nascent, and we need it to accelerate pretty fast. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So talk to me about product stewardship and sustainability here at HCPA. I know that since you've been here, you've made a lot of improvements and really just built the program from the ground up.
Yeah, so I should start by saying HCPA has a long history of engaging on these issues, and that was part of why it was recommended to me. HCPA, though, never had a designated person to really take ownership of these issues and develop out priorities, member engagement, actions, and so forth. So that was the role that I took on, was the first real sustainability role at HCPA. And how do we build this out? How do we build out the disparate actions that we're doing into something that's cohesive, engages the membership, and has specific goals and priorities so that we can really make tangible change?
Got it. And so you've formed a Sustainability and Product Stewardship Council.
Exactly. So we formed the council. We also formed, and this is kind of unique for HCPA councils, we formed a board of members to oversee that council and provide strategic input and guidance on a regular basis. And we did that because we thought sustainability is such a broad issue. We want to make sure that we're really focusing on the right things. And we're going to need our members to tell us what those things are and what's important to them.
Yeah, well, and it is such a critical thing. I mean, this is certainly, sustainability in particular has become a household topic, right? So product stewardship has been around, it feels like forever, throughout my whole career, certainly. And I think there's a whole awareness, and obviously HCP was doing a lot with that and its member companies. But sustainability is really today and the future, and thinking about how we continue to grow and innovate into a more sustainable future.
Exactly. You could not have said it better.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and so on that topic of innovation, I know that you guys have recently introduced or reintroduced and revamped your innovation awards.
We did, and we're really excited about it. Yeah. So we revamped them about 3 years ago after we created the Sustainability and Product Stewardship Council. We wanted to make sure that we had a pathway for recognizing innovations that supported our sustainability goals. And we had an existing awards system in place, but it wasn't geared towards sustainability. It wasn't very clearly tied to stuff that helps move us towards, again, that socially and environmentally sustainable economy. And it wasn't obvious to the general membership what the value these innovations provided to them on that front. So we said, what can we do to make this a total revamp? So what we did is we added in 5 specific categories: carbon footprint, circular economy, end user communication, technology, and ingredients, and said, hey, we want to make sure that we recognize innovations in each of these categories because each of these are essential paths to getting us to that better place on sustainability. And we also want to make sure that every single category we recognize is focused on sustainability. And finally, we want to make sure that those are judged by an expert board of our membership. So we decided we're going to have it judged by the Sustainability and Product Stewardship Council board.
Got it.
And we put that in front of our members at our general session, and it's been a fantastic hit.
Right. Well, and I was there yesterday at the general session when the Innovation Award winners were announced. I'm personally excited about some of the innovations. So Clorox's toilet bomb, which won, well, both for use of AI and technology, I guess, but it sounds like a great solution for a lot of issues. WD-40 for
end user communication.
End user, that's it. Yeah, I mean, because that's a long legacy product, as well as some an ingredient manufacturer, Lanxess, won an award, as well as Inspire, a distributor. So you really, those awards recognize people across the spectrum of your member community.
And that's very intentional. We want to make sure we have a diverse membership, and we know we do, and we need all of them. We want to make sure we're recognizing the value that they all provide to us.
Yeah. So that's an obvious priority that you guys have, and maybe a win that you've identified since you've had this council created. What else have you guys focused on?
We have 3 big picture focus areas. So I should say first, we take a very product-centric approach. We don't necessarily get into the high-level corporate reporting requirements. We're focused on what product is reaching the end consumer or the end user. How do we make that better? How do we make that better in a way that's tangible to them? So we have 3 different focus areas. One is the sustainable chemistry, so what's actually going into that product formulation. The second is the packaging. Okay. So what materials are we using to package that product? How are we doing that? Is it perhaps set up in a system that incentivizes reuse or refill? Is it set up in a way that reduces the weight of the packaging? Could we perhaps use more recycled content, less virgin material? Those kinds of questions are what we're asking on the packaging side. And that's been a really big focus area for us, I would say. Of our 3, that's been the one to take it by far the most attention.
Yeah, and I know that you've talked about aerosol recycling and the focus there.
Exactly, yeah. So we started a aerosol recycling initiative with our partner, our sister trade association, the Can Manufacturers Institute, CMI. We launched that back in May of 2022. That initiative has 2 goals that are both quantitative and time-bound. So by 2030, we're aiming to increase the aerosol recycling access rate to 85%. So that's making sure that...
That's significant.
Exactly. That 85% of the population has access to recycle their empty aerosols, which would be a pretty big jump from where we are right now.
Yeah.
I mean, so the most recent numbers we had from the Sustainable Packaging Coalition were just above 60%.
Which is that's better than I would have expected, actually.
I should say, though, we recently had a revamped methodology that looked at just more specific messaging that dropped us down to 39.
Okay.
So there's a ways to go there.
Yes.
But we also have some very great ideas for how to make progress, including talking to the MRFs that are perhaps more resistant to accepting aerosols and making sure that we're addressing the safety concerns that they have on that end.
Yeah, well, and then of course one of the big challenges, and I know that this is something that HCPA is interested and concerned about, as well as your member companies, is really extending it to the consumer. Because really, even myself as an educated consumer, I get confused as to what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, what I can recycle, what I can't. And so I think that whole education process along through to the consumers becomes critical.
And that's a great segue to first of all, our second goal for the Aerosol Recycling Initiative, which is to have 90% of aerosols labeled with information about their recyclability and also how to appropriately recycle the can.
Got it.
And I should say for that one, we're at a baseline of about 29% based on use of the how to recycle label. But that's also one that we can really change, right? Our brands have an opportunity to change their labels and put that information on there. At this point, it's more of a question of how do we balance that with what the constant activity we're seeing at the state level in terms of regulating what can and cannot be called recyclable and making sure that we're in a good place with compliance before we then go tell our members, hey, put this additional information on there.
Right. And well, and then obviously and I'm familiar with some of the challenges that have gone on when we think about advanced recycling, much less traditional recycling, around the variability of state and local regulations and requirements.
And it is important to think about the fact that waste infrastructure is very local. I mean, every state's going to have a different setup for their end markets, for the facilities that recycle their products, for the collection systems that they have in place for the consumer. So it's difficult in some ways to achieve harmonization on a lot of this stuff.
Right.
We're going to need perhaps to explore a federal solution, which is its own challenge in this day and age. So we didn't hold our breath for that.
We have talked about that. In fact, I've talked about that with a couple of your colleagues, but I know that that's been quite a topic as well, particularly with the new administration coming in and just the uncertainty that any new administration brings to bear across the federal agencies, et cetera.
Right. So I think we see that that's probably not going to be a pathway that's likely in the near future. So that's why we're trying to, with the aerosol recycling initiative, to engage directly with these waste management service providers and say, hey, what can we do proactively that's not a legislative or a regulatory fix, because we're not going to get that, to make sure that we're addressing your concerns. And if that's financial support, we'll get you financial support. Just tell us what you need. We do also have as our third pillar certifications, credibility, and claims. And that's to make sure that we're thinking about what are we then telling the consumer about what's on the product? What kind of eco labels are companies using? What kind of statements are they making? Does that make sense? Is the information accessible to the consumer? Does it get them what they need to know? Is there a preponderance of labels? Is there a way we can perhaps harmonize on some of what we're trying to say here? So that is a big pillar for us. We engage deeply, as you've probably heard from others, with EPA Safer Choice, with other certifications that are out there that are leading eco labels in this space, helping members figure out what can they say and what can't they say, and what's really a holistic view of the product.
And do you guys see a clear pathway forward? Because it's a pretty complex issue.
Well, we had a great session this morning, actually a joint sustainability retail discussion about how can we align on what wording makes sense to the end consumer, and do we need to look at perhaps a living standard, something that evolves as our understanding of the science evolves.
Makes sense.
And then how do we train consumers to accept that there is such a thing?
Absolutely. That's critical. So now let's turn the talk to leadership. You're a young leader in your role. What have you been in your interfacing not just within HCPA itself, but across member companies to create alignment? What have you found to be critical?
Well, first of all, just always being open to learning. I know that sounds like such a basic item, but there's so much to learn out there, and these companies are all going to have a different perspective. And you're going to need that perspective, and you're going to need a champion, in all likelihood, at those companies to make sure you can drive the change that you want to achieve. So be open to learning, be open to what they're willing to tell you, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Got it. Awesome. Well, Molly, thank you for joining me today. It's been great talking with you.
Great talking with you, too. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.